China is the elephant not in the room at COP26. So what good are Glasgow agreements anyway if the leader, whose country is responsible for around 28% of the world's carbon emissions, isn't even there? And what of the fossil fuel reliance and climate goals of China, India and Russia, who, combined, make up 2/5 of the world's emissions?
China is very coal dependent. China imports a lot of oil, they import even more gas, fossil gas.
I indicated that China and Russia not showing up in Saudi Arabia was a problem. I think it's been a big mistake, quite frankly, for China, with respect to China not showing up.
Despite an absence from Glasgow, President Xi Jinping submitted China's new 2030 targets to the UN last week.
In the past 15 years, the cut of China's carbon emission intensities has greatly exceeded the climate action goals of 2020.
President Xi has already committed to peak emissions before 2030. He's already committed to net zero emissions before 2060. And so the fact he's absent from the actual in-person COP discussions, to me, is largely immaterial. China has set the stage with enormous global ambition.
Not only will China's carbon emissions peak before 2030, they intend to reduce something called carbon intensity, a measure of emissions per unit of gross domestic product, a key indicator for the world's economic powerhouse, by 65% by 2030. Crucially, for a country in which coal accounts for around 60% of energy supply, they plan on cutting all fossil fuels in energy to 75% by 2030, a sign that China intends to continue its dominance in zero carbon emissions technologies.
China, in my view, is already the world's largest developer of zero emissions industries of the future. They're the largest investor, and China is talking about building 1,200 gigawatts of wind and solar. And just to put that in an Australian context, that is 20 times the entire electricity generating capacity of Australia.
Unlike all other participants at Glasgow who've signed up to net zero by 2050, Russia only plans to reduce emissions by 80% in that year. President Putin, absent from Glasgow, instead sent a pre-recorded message affirming that Russia will strive for carbon neutrality by 2060.
We don't just want to reach carbon neutrality, but make it so that in the nearest 3 decades, the accumulated volume of greenhouse gas emissions in Russia is less than even for our neighbours in the European Union.
His tundra is burning. He's in literally the tundra is burning. He has serious climate problems.
Russia intends to use its vast forests as a carbon sink and did sign up to Glasgow's agreement to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. But as a major gas supplier to Europe, Russia refused to join with more than 100 countries pledging methane cuts, as did Australia and India.
India is the only big economy in the world that has delivered both in letter and spirit on its Paris commitments.
India's announcement at Glasgow of a net zero target 2 decades after the US and 10 years later than China has been widely received as a strategic move.
So India's committed to net zero emissions by 2070, a very conservative target. They've also committed within that to a 45% emissions intensity of economic growth, a 45% reduction by 2030. That is really important to get on the path to decarbonisation. They committed to 500 gigawatts of renewables by 2030.
The developing country, vulnerable to climate change with an emerging middle class, is seeking $1 trillion in climate finance, mainly from developed countries further down the decarbonisation pathway.
Prime Minister Modi has left a huge amount of room on the table. He's emphasising the common but differentiated responsibilities. He's emphasising that the Paris Agreement involved the OECD helping fund the energy decarbonisation of emerging markets.
Unlike China, which is relying on transition fuels, India could leapfrog into zero-emissions industries.
We're seeing India building out its solar manufacturing capacity, talking about a green hydrogen strategy and electric vehicles and lithium-ion batteries.
With Glasgow coming to the pointy end of negotiations, the promises and actions of the world's developing nations and big polluters so far has been mixed. Hedging their bets, not wanting or needing to lead in conquering emissions challenges, while the first world still grapples with theirs.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.